Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about us at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about media production, virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we'll have 2 hours talking about education. We don't put that on YouTube, so you'll have to come in to Zoom to check that out. At 10 o'clock, though, we'll be back with our own Laura Thompson. She'll be talking about accessibility in education. We're really excited about that. We will be putting that back up on YouTube. Tomorrow, of course, we have our kind of philosophical discussion. This is the best day to ask questions about office hours. Why are we doing what we're doing? And general discussion about media and so on and so forth. We don't record it and we don't send it to YouTube. So if you ask a technical question and then you don't watch, you won't see it. So we just always want to warn you that it tends to be a little bit more of a meandering conversation. All right, now I'm going to hand it off to the host for today, Emily Russo.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. We are going to get into the questions in just a second, but I wanted to remind you that we answer your questions. We like to wax poetic about what you choose for us as the audience. So make sure that you're voting on the questions and that you're putting questions into Mukana. All right, let's go ahead and get started with our first question today.
Thank you, Emily. Guy Cochran is here from Seattle, USA. As we get back to doing live in-person shows, are we going to see more auto-tracking cameras replace traditional manned cameras?
Jeffrey.
Gosh, I hope not. It's I've been doing a lot of work with tracking cameras in the last couple weeks, and I just don't think that they're ready for any type of prime time right now. I do when I start going back out, I'll definitely have to be manually moving cameras around, and it would be nice to actually have the AI ability and be able to trust it. But there's points where it'll just go off into the distance, and you'll have to try and retrieve your camera at the wrong time.
Jonas?
So I think there totally will be one of the leading ones is Polymotion Chat by Mark Roberts. They have a really interesting platform. You see they do post tracking of the person and then try to follow them. That's one of the ones that I think probably work best. I think what we will probably see, there's multiple systems and they all augment an operator. They are not there to replace an operator. What I think we will see is remote operators of like, if you have an amazing camera operator and they can remotely design the look and feel of the show, that will probably help. I'm experimenting with my Ronin and an Falcon Eye of a tracking of a speaker walking on stage, especially if there's a good background separation. That should be pretty easy for it to do. And then I'll always have remote control over all those cameras from at home. So I think it will augment local operators, and we might not see as many local operators, but some still.
Alex?
We're slowly starting to see our clients and some of our partners realize that the hybrid event, that what we used to call live streaming your event, is not very effective. And so the problem really is that people have now gotten used to things that are personally to them. When there's nobody in the room, your online audience is in the front row. When there's anybody in the room, your online audience is in the back row. And the online audience now is the largest audience. And it's becoming larger and larger every day. And so you don't want to put them in the back row, not because they'll complain, but because they'll just not feel like showing up the next time. There'll be something else that's a little bit more important than your event because they're not engaged. They're not part of that process. And so I think that the idea of shooting people on stage will continue for a little while, but I think that by the time we get really good at tracking, most of that era will be over. So I think that we're moving towards. I mean, that's what we did with we had a lot of those things, and broadcast TV is probably a better model for where we're probably going with events, which is that maybe we put a couple people in, but really it doesn't make any sense. As soon as you decide that your audience online is much bigger than your audience in the room, you start moving more and more towards a studio. And you actually show it there. So in that environment, the tracking doesn't become as viable, in the process, because it's, you want to have, it's a precision shot. And I think that's the real issue is that precision. Now we use PTZs all the time. So if people aren't moving around, we'll use a PTZ, but we have one person run that. And then when we augment them with PTZs, we'll have one person running 3 or 4 cameras, and then the key cameras are done by a person. We've done some auto tracking. We just haven't found it to be, it doesn't have the nuance that we wanted for our shows, and so we stopped using
it. Mitchell.
Yeah, I hate to see it overused, like PTZ cameras sometimes get overused by people. And auto tracking can be distracting. Obviously, there's something wrong if you have to auto track, because if you're doing an event where everybody's planned out and they know where their marks are, there shouldn't have to be a lot of motion and jerkiness and things that go along with it. So I agree with everybody before me. I think it's something that needs to be used like a spice, but the human element works best.
Tim?
Yeah, I think what Mitch just said as far as the human element is the thing, because it starts feeling really unnatural, especially for those people that like to move a lot in a house of worship setting that we're in. Man, those people like to move, and they're all over the place. And then really they're just interacting with the in-person audience. That's why we're actually building a second studio to go to from time to time during our gathering times, which will be better. But I do feel like the auto tracking of any kind, it just feels a little, it's kind of cool, but it's distracting. It's like, that's a little weird, because it'll move with every single, left to right movement. It seems like it's always adjusting a little bit. And a natural camera operator will kind of let that breathe a little bit on the edges. And so I don't feel like it's as good of an experience.
Alex?
Just on something that Tim said, one of the things that we train a lot of speakers when they're willing to be trained is to walk and post, so we basically explain to them that your show will look better online if you just find a mark. And the ones that are really, where I learned it was, there's a couple companies that do this where they literally, they spike the floor. So there's X's where they need to be. And when they say this part of the slide, they're going to stand on that X and they're going to stand and say the point that they want to make, because it allows the cameras to go into a head and shoulder shot. And then between that point and the next point, they walk to the next place. And so they're basically walk, stop, walk, stop, walk, stop. If you watch someone who's not randomly doing this, people who are untrained will randomly wander around the stage. People who are trained, you'll see them walk and post. And when they're about to say something important, they'll stop. And most likely, if you get a wide shot, you'll see an X right underneath where they did that, because they decided that was the right place to do that.
All right, next question.
Paul Valhus from Austin, Texas. What can office hours learn from Twit TV and other similar shows? And what can office hours learn from cable TV news?
Mitch?
Well, I think that there's a lot to be learned from broadcast, particularly since we're looking to emulate some broadcast things. There are probably some things that Alex likes and some things he doesn't like. But if we could look like the Super Bowl when we do office hours, that would be cool.
All right, Alex?
Yeah, I think that learning from Leo, from a Twit perspective, just watching Leo, he's a master of running the event, like having a conversation. So that I think that is the part that Leo really brings to that is, and I think that's the biggest thing you can learn watching Twit, is just how he masterfully gets between, manages a conversation with a bunch of people that don't know each other very well, that don't do this every day with each other, maybe every week, but he brings a lot of people in that have never done this before, and he keeps that conversation interesting. So I think that's the number one thing from a Twit perspective to learn from broadcast. I mean, I think that I'm always looking at just the quality, is what Mitch was talking about with the quality of the graphics and how it looks, and how they're using them. There's an incredible amount of budget being used to figure those things out, and so I study it all the time. The content of the show is less.
Jonas?
I think one of the things that we probably could work on is a 24/7 semi-live, because we have so much metadata. We know, like, if we add a system of you can like a question, that all could go into a flow that the algorithm learns what you like, and you 24/7 get fed with questions from a topic that you like. So education people would get education questions. It could feed off like different shows. So if you're into birding, it can also pull in those questions, and you would have a 24/7 stream of really good conversations. It probably need like a break, because there would be definitely some FOMO happening. But I think it would be the next level to like TikTok, but for questions. And we have all the metadata that we need for it already.
Alex?
I agree that a 24/7 makes sense. I think that the funny thing is, I don't know, the metadata will be useful, and we definitely want to keep metadata on the questions. I think that if you just ran 24/7 Q&A about certain things, and people knew that it was there, that there'd be 1,000 questions, and people are just voting them up and down, and you're picking ones that have 300 votes or 800 votes, and it would it would just be this constant flow of questions. And so I definitely agree with Jonas that a 24/7 makes sense, and I think that the metadata would help it a lot. But I think that in the beginning you could probably just turn it on, and just if people knew that smart people were answering questions all day, they'd probably just keep showing up and asking them and voting on them. And the kind of thing you could do though is identify, like when I'm answering Jonas's question, it tells Jonas, hey, we're about to answer your question, and so you can jump back onto the show if you had asked it 2 days before.
That'd be cool. All right, next question.
Paul is back again with a question. What's a free tool to draw a network map of routers, switches, devices, etc. for Mac, PC, Android, and iOS?
Keynote.
I don't think it doesn't work on all of them though. That's the trick. I'm trying to think. There is one. There's a mind mapping tool that, you want to think about mind mapping oftentimes in those areas to kind of figure that out. It's not like one that I've been using that I haven't bought is Miro. I don't know if anyone saw Miro.
I've used that at work. Mm-hmm. And it can be good. It's freemium. So like you only get 2 boards for free, and then you have to start paying. But yeah, it has the built-in arrows, so you can make flowcharts really quick and easy. They connect shapes, Post-it notes, pictures, all sorts of, so you could take actual images of the things and put them in there. And you can print them out or save them as PDF and I think PNG and maybe SVG files. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, you could save it that way. Mitchell? Oh, we can't hear you, Mitch.
Doesn't Here to Record have a nifty one for doing that? I don't know if it works on all the systems, but it's an HTML based program.
It does. In fact, you can get one. You're right.
Exactly what I'm showing right now.
Yeah, I'll stay out of the way.
All right.
No, it's just a tool that's working on the web platform, so any platform will be able to use it.
And what's it called? Is it H2R Gear? Is that the name of it, or is
exactly?
That okay. All right. Well, there we go. Question answered, Paul. All right. Next question.
I think Alex had a comment before we move on.
Sure.
I was playing with it, yeah, and I apologize to John Barker for not mentioning Here to Record. I was thinking about something else, but Here to Record is great, and it works well. I have to admit, as someone who uses OmniGraffle a lot, it's hard. There's still things that I'm faster at there, so I still build most of mine there. But but you can definitely build one at a time in Here to Record for free, and then you have to start paying for it, I think, for the second one. But I would definitely play with it.
All right, next question.
Matt Cool from Montreal, Canada. I'm looking for a streaming platform that supports 2 languages where the audience member can select what language they hear. Any suggestions?
Jonas.
So I would actually look into having a streaming platform that allows you to get an embed and then doing a custom stream for one language and another one for the other. One of the coolest things that we have done or worked on is multi-language graphics. So for example, with a graphics tool like H2R Graphics, you can have multiple outputs and assign graphics to multiple outputs. So that way, if you have French and English, the lower FIRBs is in English and French on the specific stream with the translation. And then you take those 2 embed codes and use a little bit of JavaScript, probably like 10 lines, 2 buttons that allow you to switch between them. Don't embed them on the same page though, because otherwise people will accidentally start both. So try to always only show one. And I would go with like just 2 embeds.
Alex.
So in a lot of cases, it's the player, not so much the platform. So there's a lot of ways to deliver both captions as well as multiple languages in something like HLS. Those are available to the player, but the player has to be able to support it. So the native Apple AV player, for instance, AV Foundation player will support as many languages as you give it, both in audio and in text. Same with, I believe, the Akamai player will do the same. Then there's a JS player that does have that available as well. So that JS player is a lot cheaper. Well, the Apple player is free, but it only works on one platform. There's a native one for Android. It is less feature rich than the AV foundation layer one. So you have to kind of look at that one kind of carefully. But those are some of the options there. It's the player though, because what happens is with HLS is you're going to send it, here's your video, and then I can just send packets that are, here's all these 6 languages in audio coming in segments. And then here's the captions that are all in that as well. And then it'll show up, the player will see it in the manifest and know that it should put stuff out there for it. And you can just jump from one to the next. And it's not changing your video, it's just changing the audio stream that it's using.
Cool. All right, next question.
Paul Valhus of Austin, Texas. Why will Microsoft build the metaverse and not Facebook? And what role will Apple play? Hardware?
John.
This is a brewing battle for the next coming decades, Paul. And I think you misworded that. Facebook is building a metaverse. They changed their name to Meta. Apple's got a slightly different take than those guys. But Microsoft has the biggest gaming portfolio on the planet right now. They've acquired probably over 30 studios in the last 10, 20 years. It's immense. Activision being the last one for $68 billion. And so there's a lot of work going into this arena, but it's a ways off. I'm interested to hear what Alex has to say.
Jeffrey?
So Metaverse and Facebook are two totally different things if you think about it. And they don't want to rebuild Facebook because there are still people that are still liking the way the Facebook works. They'll end up, think of Metaverse like the world. And in Facebook, they'll be like a door to a shop or something like that, where you'll walk in, you'll do your Facebook, you'll get out, and then you'll do your other stuff. Apple will be building its own little world, so that we'll see how that works.
All right, Alex?
I think fundamentally Microsoft and Facebook are both trying to create an escapism, that you're going to go somewhere other than the real life. And Apple is going to spend more time focusing on how do you augment your real life, and how you add those things. And I think that Apple will probably take a lot of ground that way, because I think that the problem really is that as you get closer and closer to people looking real, the uncanny valley will be brutal. Like that is a very dangerous place as they start to move up. Right now, we don't have any legs and we're all there, but there's going to be this drive to make them look more and more realistic. That's why when there's metahuman, right? And but the problem is that as you get closer, it will bother you more. And so they actually have some uphill battles. The other thing is that they're going to have the same problems that Google Hangout or Google Glass had, which is that the early adopters will tend to be fringe, and those early adopters will do things that you probably don't want to do in a community, and so that's going to be a challenge, because it'll be hard to get to the meat of the market that way. So I think those are going to be the challenges. If you ask me who I think that will think of Metaverse, probably Zoom.
Jonas?
So it came up in After Hours because I watched the video, and the theory was that there's 2 ways how a company will establish the metaverse. It's either through the gaming thing, and Microsoft is building that already with their Xbox Live subscription. So like they made something that they can acquire a game company without losing money, because earlier if you acquired a game company, you made their games exclusive to your platform, and you lost a lot of money because you couldn't put it out to the PS5, for example, anymore. Now with the Xbox gaming subscription, you fold it into that, you get a more and more competitive universe for your Microsoft account that is all interconnected. That's the one attack vector, how they could attack the metaverse. The other way is over the business. Just in the video that I just posted into the Mukana chat, the theory was said it's like when they introduced the PCs, that it was over the businesses. Nobody wanted to have it at home other than enthusiasts. But it started when companies were buying it for their employees. So the theory is that with Microsoft, what Microsoft is doing with Teams is kind of already guiding to a metaverse, because they're putting everything together, document management, emails, your meetings, everything flows to this Microsoft Teams platform. And if at one point it will just pop out into VR or whatever you want the metaverse to be, and that could be the second way how Microsoft could achieve it. That was the theory of that video.
Interesting. Next question.
And the next question is from Aaron Gencarelli, from Flagstaff, Arizona. Is it possible to set a static IP on a playout B? If so, how?
Jonas?
Yeah, so if you're talking about playout being on a Raspberry Pi, you definitely can. We just modified the Raspberry Pi OS image and are resupplying that for you, so you don't have to go through all the install steps. During the imaging, you actually, in the latest Raspberry Pi imager, you can select a couple of settings. You should be able to do it that way, or there should be a file on the SD card where you can type in your Wi-Fi or your static IP address settings. And if that doesn't work, hit me up on our Discord server and we'll get that solved.
So nice when the developers actually hit the panel.
Right. Next question.
Tim Holm is here from San Lorenzo, California. I mounted about 50 1x1 foot foam panels. They look great until the next morning when I came in when 30 were on the floor. How would you mount them?
Hey Tim,
Alex?
how did you mount them, Tim?
I used those 3M square patches. I did 5 on each. So one on each corner and then one in the middle. Pushed them on and yeah. That's
So
what I did.
I've been doing for 20 years, pretty much every office I walk into, I start adding these panels to them. In fact, I think I have the same panels that I've had for at least 15 years. I use staple gun. So an industrial size staple gun. I put 4. It's in the corner. Sometimes if I'm putting it on the ceiling, I'll use one more in the middle to keep it from sagging. But outside of that, I use 4 or 5 staples in the corners there, and I change them because when you rip them off, you put tiny little holes in them. The reason I use staples is because they never fall down. Like it just if you put 4 of them in there, they're going to stay there. Number 2, so much easier to clean up. It's much less spackling when you leave. So,
Mitchell?
I have acoustic carpeting on the walls, and Velcro sticks to it naturally. You only need one of the 2 loop and fastener, whatever it is. The other thing is if it's like a sheetrock wall and you don't care about messing it up a little bit, a lot of the companies that sell those foam squares also sell an adhesive that you can put on there sparingly on the back of it, and it will never fall to the floor. So those are your 2 choices. Other
Jeffrey.
than
Jeffrey?
In order to put any type of adhesive onto a wall or a ceiling, you basically have to, first of all, wash, second of all, smooth down, whether it be with sandpaper or something like that, and then third, wash again before you even start thinking about putting on adhesive. And if it doesn't fall off right away, it will fall off within time. So, and that's because of humidity, that's because of dryness as temperatures go. I do the staple thing as well, like with Alex, because the one thing I like about it is if I need to take a staple out, I have a flathead screwdriver and a needle nose pliers, and I just basically lift and pull, and then I can restaple from there.
And as a wife of someone who went and used acoustical tiles for the brand new room in the house and ordered special fittings, we used T-pins, the 3-4-inch T-pins at an angle and went in around, and it did hold them and they didn't come down. And when we moved out, we didn't even have to spackle because the holes were so tiny. So
Yeah, I bought some of those T-pins, but I cannot get them through the wall very easily.
it might be the type of wall. We put them in at an angle through the drywall, and it, different angles on each side of the tile too, and that created so it didn't fall. But anywho, it worked and it wasn't messy. Alex?
I did use the adhesive the first time I put up panels 20 years ago. That's why I don't do it anymore. Is because when you take it off, what they show you to do with those acoustic tiles is like an S curve on it, and then you just tear that part out of the wall, and it just destroys the walls. Like it just wipes them out. So that's why I went to staples.
All right, next question.
And it's from panelist Serge Blondin from Montreal, Canada. Why, when I switch with my Stream Deck and Companion, my atem doesn't do transition?
Jonas?
So it depends on what command you're using on your Companion, because you could be switching it directly as an aux bus or as a cut bus, and the atem has this weird thing where the cut and the auto technically aren't cut and auto because they have special settings in the atem setup. So you can set up different ways of how the key should move if you want the chroma key to take off and on. So maybe that's where the confusion comes from, that the cut and auto indeed isn't the cut and auto on the atem mini itself. But if you do the same operation on a Companion or a Stream Deck, it's totally different.
Mitchell?
Slightly different answer from a different source. I use MixFX Pro, which is rock solid, even in beta for the Companion application, and they're working on getting the feedback back through Companion, which means the buttons will actually light up with the status from the atem.
Jeffrey?
There's one other thing, and that is the push button down event and the push button up event, and Companion will allow you to separate that a little bit more. But if you're doing straight from the Stream Deck, you might have to put that into consideration when you're putting that together.
Serge?
Mitchell, are you saying that you're using the Stream Deck with Mix Effect?
Yeah, and you have to use a special version of Companion because they go through a beta stage, so there's a beta version of Companion with MixFX Pro, and it adds like 80 key presses that you can use on Stream Deck, and it's very, very good.
And how do you need to have an iPad with MixFX running to be able to use that?
I actually use my M1 Mac. If it's a Silicon Mac, it'll run it. And if you have an iPad, same thing. MixFX would run on the iPad, and then it would talk to the Companion program on your Mac or whatever it is it's running on.
Thank you.
All right, next question.
Next question from TJ Asher from Minneapolis, Minnesota. For international air travel, what is your go-to carry-on bag?
John?
You know, a lot of people have travel on their bucket list. Well, I got to check that off because I'm done traveling around the world. I ended up with the Toomey series and having the four-wheel overnight bag with the giant handle. The wheels on the Toomey are fantastic for walking miles through terminals. And then I have a little briefcase that slides onto the top of the handle. And then I have the giant suitcase. All Toomey, they're fantastic.
Peter?
So I use Pelican Case makes a specific size Pelican case that will fit in the overhead in the small CR series jets travel internationally, which I invariably end up on one of those somewhere. So it fits in the overhead. And then for my other carry-on, I use the Tactical 511 Rush 12 backpack that has put up with lots of stuff over the years.
Alex?
I use our standard issue for everybody in Pixel Core for a long time was the Rush 24, so the slightly larger one of that for a backpack. So that was, I mean, literally we like, here, welcome to the company. Here's your backpack. Here's the Pixel Core patch. You know, you go, no, here you go. And we put names on everybody's handles. We got ones on there because otherwise you couldn't tell what was going on. For what I use, yeah, exactly. For what I use is I have this is the 1510. I think that Peter was talking about there. So that's the 1510. It's 22 by 14 by 9, which in the United States is the maximum size that you're supposed to put an overhead in, and it will generally fit. There's only been one plane, I think it was in India, that I couldn't put it in the overhead. They'll all look at it and go, it won't fit. And then it fits. So, because the planes were built for it. So, I mean, built at a certain spec. So that's the one that I've used. The problem with that one oftentimes is that people will oftentimes look at it and think it's heavy. So I've had it like extra weighed in Germany or something like that. So in that case, I use this. This is this is the Away, and it has a battery in it, which turned out to be a real problem. They now pop out. The batteries pop out, which is good. But it has a battery in it to charge your things. But the best thing about it is it's really light and it doesn't have a lot of extra things in it. What you're looking for in a carry-on, in my opinion, is something that is just doesn't have any weight. You know, so because you're going to put a bunch of stuff in it that's going to get weighed for carry-on. So anyway, that's my two.
Jeffrey?
So yeah, I had that Pelican case too, and I really loved it, especially overseas, because when I go on Virgin, there's enough legroom that I can actually put it in front of me to make more of a leg rest, because some of those leg rests are just horrible. But otherwise, I will use SKB came out with a component rack. It's a 2U component rack, and now that since I'm not using laptops to do any type of streaming, I'm using the mini PCs, and I'll probably be putting the Mac Mini right into this case. I can put in 2 or 3 computers and then have a top that I can put over there. to put my laptop into. If it needs to go underneath the plane for some reason, I can take the laptop out and put it into my bag, and it's all TSA approved locks and everything like that. So I'm not too worried about it getting underneath the plane.
Alex?
Keynote, by the way. That's what I use it for the graphics. That's my little keynote.
All right, moving on to the next question.
And it's from Tim Holm of San Lorenzo, California. How do the Blackmagic 4K cameras work as still cameras? While the new OM1 announced and the GH6 coming, are they competitive?
Jonas?
I don't think the Blackmagic 4K works at all as a still camera. It really is designed for video, and it was one of the reasons why I bought my GH5 that you're looking at me through. I really like its still function, and the video functions are also some of the best that I found in a camera. I really like the format. I have a couple of those, and now for like broadcast, they have the BGH model, and I think the GH6 will be a game changer again because it has internal ProRes recording of 4K 120p. It just has a lot of features that will make it a real solid choice for a long time, and that's why I bought mine, because I wanted to buy one and keep it for 7 years, and I'm still not shooting 4K for the projects that I do, so my GH5 is still good for me.
Alex?
None of the Blackmagic cameras work very well I agree with you that they're not very good at stills. A lot of it's just user feedback. When you push the button, it doesn't make any sound because it's designed to take photos while you're shooting video. It took me a little while to figure that out. Like, oh, they don't want to make noise while you're doing it. So I understand that, but it makes it very hard to feel like you're shooting anything. So so I wouldn't use it for that. I think you just have to decide how much you're going to use it for video. I admit that 99% of my photos are taken by my iPhone. So, and then for work or when I'm really going to go out, I take a dedicated still camera. And that's why I have a lot of Blackmagic cameras, because I just need them to shoot video, and the pipeline for that is so much better that's the only thing about the OM1 and the GH6 is just the pipeline of controlling the cameras and coloring them and doing all those things is, less, it's more opaque.
Jonas?
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that GH6 is coming out in 2 days, so maybe we'll do a little second ear in after hours talking about it.
Is there a keynote? When's the keynote?
In 2 days.
Monday?
February 22, 1 a.m. UTC. Whatever that converts
everyone's trying to do the math. Yeah, exactly. So it sounds like Tuesday evening.
Yeah, it and they have been like really hard on the controls, and that's one of the parts that I start to love with those for live is you can really remotely control them. For images, one of the greatest features with them versus a Blackmagic is I can set my GH5 on the table at the end of a vacation trip and let everybody connect to its Wi-Fi. Everybody has the little app, all my family members. They can choose the photos that they want to post and that they want to have, click them, download them, and it's so easy. It's really a nice hybrid camera.
Peter?
I was going to follow on to what Alex said. I mean, a lot of the features that you get used to in a still camera, like pushing the shutter release halfway and it making a lot of decisions, goes away on the Blackmagic camera, and that has forced me many cases to take both a still camera and the Blackmagic so that I can take still shots when I want to take still shots quickly and not have to worry about it. Conversely, you forget that it doesn't autofocus the way you think it autofocuses if you're used to a still camera, right? You actually have to tell it to focus.
All right, sorry, not Alex. Next question.
Next question from Eddie Scott in Mission Viejo, California. Is there a universal standard reference for audio dBs, decibels? How can I know if my -20 is the same as yours?
Mitchell.
Well, Eddie, dB is an international reference standard. 1 dB is the smallest change in audio that the human ear can basically pick. So it's sort of a reference as you go. For broadcast and for streaming, including office hours, we use LUFS, which is a much more robust way to determine digitally what the level is. So both of those references exist. The old one, dB. The new one luffs, and we're at minus 20. If your minus 20 is registering on your equipment, it's going to be the same on somebody else's.
All right, next question.
Next question from Zach Marley in Denton, Texas. I understand that larger sensors can allow for a more shallow depth of field, and it seems that many avoid them for live production. Wouldn't shooting at a higher T or f-stop negate this?
Alex?
Yeah, the problem with that is that you lose light. So you just have a certain amount of light that you can use for the show. So there is typically in most lenses, the sweet spot is somewhere in 5.6 is where you're the sharpest. Now you might open those up, and a lot of us will open up further so that we get that shorter depth of field. But if you start stopping it down, it's a big difference. You might have to stop to 10 or 11. You might have to go up to like f-stop 11 or something like that to get the same depth of field out of a full frame sensor that you were getting from a 2/3 inch sensor. So then you just have a lot less light to work with. And so in a live environment, you don't necessarily have that ability. I use Super 35 for everything under 75 feet, and then I go to 2/3 for everything over 75 feet. So I don't use 2/3 very often anymore at all. So a lot of us have moved to that. Full frame sensors are very hard to deal with in a live environment because the depth of field is naturally so short. So a lot of times because what you're going to have to do is if you start stopping it down, you're going to have to start gaining it up. And there's not that many cameras that can handle that. The one exception would be the Canon ME200 and ME20 that you can gain up a lot, and make that work. You can shoot almost in the dark, and those will still give you a relatively good image.
All right, next question.
Thank you, Emily. I'm asking this question. For a new lav mic, how should you buy the cable terminated? There are many ways to go, from wired XLR to Sony, Shure, Zaxcom, wireless transmitters.
Mitchell?
And I'm sorry, once again, I'm answering my own question, but I'm buying a DPA 6060 as my main lav mic, and there is so many more termination ways. I've sort of selected microdot as the way to go. So it's sort of like a universal standard with a lot of adapters that can get me to a LEMO or an XLR or whatever else. But I'm sure Alex has many more suggestions.
Alex?
We used to use the microdot a lot. So the microdot is great because what it is, it looks like a little tiny version of your cable. Like when you get cable for TV and it comes in from the house, it's like it's got a little pin in the center and you screw it on. The microdot is like a very, very small coax that you can attach to your things, and we bought a lot of those. The real problem is that they tend to loosen, and so then you start, and the worst part is that they're not on or off. They have a tendency to loosen, and then you have a speaker up there that's going as they move, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you end up having to tape them a lot to try to make sure that they stay on. As a result, we started leaning more towards what do we use the most, and because we generally use Axient mics for that, we just moved to the TA4s. This is the 4-pin that is most natural with Shure transmitters because almost all of our transmitters are Shure. So the TA4s, and then we can convert those TA4s to anything else. But we found that to be the most efficient. But the microdots turned out maybe 80% of the audio problems that we've had in the last 10 years have been microdots.
Mitchell?
I'm so sorry to hear that because I just bought it. But is it? You would think that a screw-on terminal would be better than a standard LEMO or LEMO.
You would.
Yeah, but okay. I'll live and learn.
So if it's just you and you're doing it, it's just that we put them on lots of speakers. And so it's just, you have to tell the A2 basically to tighten it every single time they move the transmitter, and every single time you put it on, you have to tighten that, or what will happen is it'll get just a little loose, and then it's just, then you're getting static every time it jiggles.
Peter?
I was going to say, depends what you're using it for. I actually have a DPA 4066 with a microdot going into an XLR connector right now. And I've had it, I know, Alex, a year and a half now since.
But you're sitting with it. What I'm talking about is you're walking around. Like for me, we're walking around with it.
I understand. It depends on what I was going to say, it depends on your use case.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, next question.
First of all, Peter, I feel just a little bit better now, but we'll see. Paul Valhus from Austin, Texas. The LG Quad is a great monitor, but if you don't have one, what add-on hardware do you use to convert a large screen TV in a quad monitor?
Jonas?
basically, you can use whatever flavor of multi-viewer you want. There's some from Decimator, there's a Blackmagic one, there is another cheaper one from Blackmagic. Most of them are SDI based. There's also this Lynx one, which seems pretty interesting because it offers quad, full, or 4K, so you can change what you want to see, and it has a 4K HDMI output. And you can transmit to 4 cameras that way.
All right.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to put
Alex,
my
go
hand up.
ahead.
Yeah, Monoprice also makes one that'll do a 4-up, and it also has a KVM built into it. So I can't take it. I can't show it to you because it's in my system, but I actually use it for exactly that, which is it'll switch between the 4 HDMIs. It'll give you a 4-up or switch to any individual one of those. And when you switch to an individual one, you'll get control, keyboard control over that computer, and then it'll go back to 4-up. And so it's about $250 or whatever, and it works great.
All right. Next question.
Zach Marley from Denton, Texas. I have a budget iPad teleprompter from Glide Gear. It seemed clear with the iPad, but when switching to a camera monitor, it seemed blurry for some reason. Any solutions?
Mitchell.
I've seen that before, and Alex can probably put this into proper words, but sometimes you can have a resolution mismatch, and it could cause some blurs because the aliasing on the text becomes an issue. But I use Lilliput for that kind of a Lilliput monitor, which works well for me.
Alex?
I think you may have a matte coating on the monitor, on the camera monitor or the coating on it, maybe coming at an angle, because a lot of those are sometimes designed to not take on a lot of specular. And so it may be that it's hitting it at a certain angle and causing it to look blurry. It would look blurry if that occurred.
All right. Next question.
And it comes to us from Zach Marley from Denton, Texas again. I'm moving from an area with fiber and broadband, but I am moving to a more rural area. Starlink is ordered, but will not be available. I guess soon is when it's going to come in. How many different cellular connections would be recommended for streaming and virtual teaching?
I actually had this issue yesterday bidding on a house. Alex?
As many as you can get. So, but the main thing is that the problem you get into if you're trying to do Zoom or something else is that as you start to bond these together, they're going to start to the jitter between them the variance there between the modems will cause breakup, or it'll just be laggy for a Zoom connection. So Zoom or any kind of virtual conferencing tends to have a hard time with bonded cellular solutions. So you may want to go, one of the things you may want to think about is if you have some friends or if you have a couple people that have different phones, you really want to go to where you're moving and figure out which cellular provider is going to be the best one that's in that area, and get that one. So I mean, for instance, in my house, AT&T is way better. Verizon breaks up a lot more than that. So it does make a difference. It just depends on where they put their transmission towers.
All right, next question.
And Paul Valus from Austin, Texas is back with a question. Techcrunch says Apple's biggest scandal of 2022 is already happening. Can you guess what it is?
Jeffrey?
Well, for TechCrunch, that would be the clickbait that they just used, but it's all about AirTags and the good and the bad of AirTags, where it can find your keys when you leave them 20 miles away because it's pinging off other people's phones. There's problems where people are using it to drop AirTags into bags and pockets so they can follow people around. And the day that we wake up and find a map full of everybody's location with an AirTag, that's going to be, I don't know if that'll ever happen, but there's always a possibility that could happen.
Mark?
On a non-technical note, Washington Post released yesterday that Apple's employees in some stores are trying to unionize. So I don't know if that's the biggest story of the summer or not. Alex?
Yeah, the AirTag is a horrible way to do tracking. So, I think that I think we talked about this on Mac Break. It can be easily traced back. It can be, traced back to the owner of who put that AirTag in. You can try to use burner phones, but that would be very difficult to actually, if it became a real issue, our law enforcement agencies can turn the dial up a little bit and find you immediately. like it is a, like it's a very, very transparent system. It's not designed to be secretive. It's designed for you to find your keys. And so if you're going to really get serious about this, you're going to buy a GPS with a SIM card out of Alibaba, with a burner, card and sent to an address that doesn't belong to you. So people who are like actually serious about this are not going to use this program, and people who aren't serious about it are going to get caught and go to jail. And then there's a whole bunch of TikTokers who are going to create a story that they were traced because it gets them a lot of views. So that's the biggest problem Apple has, is a lot of people trying to like basically saying I was tracked by somebody, and it's good. It's good to get attention and get a bunch of people to view it. But that's, most of what we see on social media when people feel like they've been wronged, about 80%, 90% of it is just fabricated. Like just, like it's all, I don't mean like kind of fabricated, completely fabricated. Like they did it so that you would click on it. So anyway, so I think it's going to fade out when people realize, some of the more intelligent folks have been figuring out that it's a very inefficient system to do this with. You're better off using a GPS tracker, or even Tile is better than this one, because Apple has so many tracebacks, and Apple will keep on tightening that up.
All right, next question.
Paul again with a question. Checking a rumor, did Alex drop kick Synergy?
Serge?
Well, I don't know if Alex is dropping Synergy or not, but I can tell you that a recommendation could be the Logitech MX Creative keyboard that can be connected to multiple devices at one time.
Alex?
Yes, I've uninstalled it off my machines, and I will not put it back on. It created the most intense bug that I've ever seen on a Mac. I don't know if I've ever seen a Mac do what it did, which is that basically what happened was I was trying to just move some hard drives over to the side, and one of them just got a little past the edge between two computers in Synergy, and my M1 went into a race condition that was unrecoverable. And when I say unrecoverable, unplugging everything and restarting it with the shift key down did not get me my keyboard or mouse back. like it went into a death spiral. Now I finally, after doing that 3 or 4 times, I got it to let me get in there and turn it off. I don't know why one worked over the other. I did exactly the same thing. I turned it off, and it's still not, like, things aren't working. So I have to now grind that M1 all the way to the ground to try to figure out how to get it to come back up again and be a normal computer. So it destroyed it. Like it just like, and I, as a Mac user, I'm not used to that kind of invasive attack on my computer. So I will never put it on another machine again. Like it was the first time it did it, I was like, oh, just lost the network, and it recovered quickly. That was when I changed the network on one of the computers. This one was so bad that I'm done. so that's it.
Dennis?
It won't be long until Apple launch Universal Control, at which point you'll be able to share your mouse and keyboard across other
Right.
Macs and other iPads. So I'm looking forward to seeing that working.
I was impatient. I'm patient now.
Oh, interesting. Okay, sorry. I was just I controlled my dad's Mac the other day from a FaceTime call, and that was pretty cool. It makes my end of tech support in Connecticut from Tennessee that much easier. But anywho. All right, next question. Oh, can't hear you, Mitchell.
Sorry about that. I'm here with another question, and it might be a spoiler alert for Star Wars fans, but here it is. Disney's The Book of Boba Fett featured an enhanced young version of Luke Skywalker in the latest episode that is the best I've seen. And examples or comments on this process?
Serge.
I just want to have a comment. No spoiler, please. I didn't watch anything of the Boba Fett yet.
Alex.
Yeah, in general, I don't think that ILM has moved from their current system yet to the new. They hired the person who did the deepfake version of Luke, and I think that they're still using the CG version. So what that oftentimes takes is they're building a very high resolution model of the original person, and then they're literally still match moving an animation that pulls it all together. So they've got someone acting it out, and they're getting facial capture. Most of that facial capture, it used to be points, but most of it is now just literally black and white data of just watching the whole thing. You get more detail that way. And so I think that that's probably what they're still doing, and they're just getting better at it. Weta was very good at it. We saw a lot of that in Lord of the Rings, and I think that ILM is coming up to speed. So
cool. All right, next question.
And it comes to us from Tim Holm, again from San Lorenzo, California. When using Synergy, does anyone else have the problem of the mouse scroll wheel becoming inconsistent?
Serge.
I did have that issue using a mouse track, a trackpad, Apple trackpad with a PC and a different Mac with Synergy. Also, all the gestures are not working. So for me, that's a big issue.
All right, next question.
From Douglas Carmichael. Last night, I purchased a set of Sennheiser HD300 PRO headphones, and I noticed they were more neutral sounding. Snare hits popped more than the Pioneer HRM-6 headphones I've always used. Why could that be?
Alex.
How those phones do, where they put crossovers, and how they represent it is an engineering decision, and oftentimes a creative decision. For instance, Beats will lean towards bass a lot more. So different headphones they've made decisions as they've listened to them as to whether they want it to be neutral or whether they want it to be a little more bassy or whether they want it to be a little bit more, so those are, they're looking for clarity. It's a subjective thing that all these headphone manufacturers, have to think through when they figure out what they're going to actually do.
All right, next question.
And it's from our very own Lois Richter in Davis, California. For getting started doing your first podcast, what would you say is the minimum gear to have?
Jeffrey.
Well, it depends on if you're talking audio podcast or video podcast. For audio podcast, I know you have the gear that you need, and that's basically a laptop and then a good microphone. You have the blue Yeti Nano for that microphone, and then just as long as you get up close to it as you're talking, you're fine from there. When you get into video podcasting, of course, that requires a lot more. And I still remember my days back in 2004 when podcasting started, and I wished I would have had the gear today that back then to starting. That would have been a lot easier to do a podcast.
Alex.
Yeah, for most of the podcasts that I've done, we have used something like a Heil PR40. I don't know if it's minimum, but it is. The off-axis rejection works really, really well in a room that might be a little echoey. It just gets rid of most of that. Otherwise, I would say an MV7. The Yeti Nano is pretty good, and you could probably, as minimum, it'd probably work fine, as Jeffrey said. For video, we usually recommend folks just look at something like a Brio and and some kind of lighting, the nanotubes or something that we send out with our kits. So those work pretty well, and that's pretty much it. You can start building from there.
Hasmik?
Yeah, I've been helping my niece. She started off doing interviews for the past year, and she had this uncanny ability to get very interesting people. Last month, she had somebody from the F1 management team. So she just used a laptop and a headset. She's now being promoted by me with a MV7 and a Scarlett Solar, and she bought a Brio. And she's using Riverside FM to do the recording. And she had great compliments from the F1 team on that particular podcast. So I'm very happy for her.
That's so cool. Can I get a link? I would love to watch that episode, if not other ones.
Sure, we'll do.
Thanks, Hasmik. All right, next question.
And Lois is back with another question, and she wants to know how much difference is there, image quality-wise, between the various current models of iPhone?
Alex.
The iPhone gets about 25% better every version. It just that seems to be the trajectory. Is clarity, the machine learning, the chips that support it. It's just about 25% better every year. And the 13 is amazing, but the 11 and 12 were great until the 13 existed. The 10 is probably the last one that I would actually use. I would still use for something. Once you get into the ones earlier than that, they fall off really fast.
John.
This is the first year I didn't stand in line. I'm one of the idiots that used to stand in line every year to get the new phone. I've had every phone since the very beginning. And I picked up my 13 I just got it this week, and I did a lot of tests because I have both my 12 and my 13 side by side. Very little difference between camera and video and stills that I could see. The battery is better. But there's a huge difference between the 11 and the 13.
Hasmek.
Yeah, for years, Damiety, my wife, has been a version behind me. It's been like a hand down for years. And for the first time this year, we both upgraded to the iPhone 13 Pro. And I must say, she feels now at a level playing field with me, and she's extremely happy with this new phone.
Good to know I'm not the only one that's fighting the who has the newer tech in the relationship thing. All right, next question.
Paul Valus from Austin, Texas. Serge mentioned MX keys. What is that? How does it work?
Serge.
I don't have the MX keys myself. Josh talked to me about it. I think Josh has one. I will buy one because I think it's a good compromise, not using Synergy and mixing PC and Macs. Because sure, if you only have Macs, universal control might be the better solution. But mixing PC and Macs as MX keys, you can copy and paste between the two machines and things like that. I think it's a pretty neat solution.
Awesome. Next question. And I think our last for this hour.
I believe you are. Stuart Fairweather from Melbourne, Australia, has this question. 3D print folk, what are your best tips for post-print surface finishing? Nail files, Dremel polishers, etc.
Jeffrey.
It depends on what you're printing and how you're printing, what type of filament you're using, and things like that. If I'm going to do any type of sanding, I'll use something towards an 80 grit for hand sanding, but that's going to take a lot of time and a lot of pressure. You're going to wear out your arm if you've got some big prints. If you've got something like a Dremel, that works really well, but you can over sand, and then all of a sudden you get little divots into your prints. There is another way to do it through isopropyl alcohol, and they actually have these little boxes you put your 3D print into, and it'll spray isopropyl alcohol to smooth out. But in order to do that, it's technically melting the 3D print. So you come up with, if you're going for precision, then it won't. You'll have to definitely do some extra sanding from there to get back to where you were with sizes.
John.
We just printed these for the rocket. These are the sleds for the flight computers, and these look really, really good. It looks metallic, but it's not. It's shiny PLA, and I don't think this requires any finishing at all. It looks fantastic.
Alex?
After watching Blair on Thursday show what she does with printing, I'm obsessed with the idea of essentially a lost wax approach, where you print it and then recast it and then into whatever thing that you want it to look like. I know that's probably a little bit more work than you wanted to go through, but it was so cool. Like, they were building jewelry where they 3D print it and then basically put it into a mold. I will be doing that sometime in the near future.
Sounds cool. Yeah, when we had the students do it, they did hand sanding, and then the more advanced high school, we got the Dremel attachment. It looks like a pen, and you can adjust the speed right at your hand and get in there. But like Jeffrey said, if you don't know what you're doing, you just put divots all over it. So,
yeah.
All right.
What I'm excited about there is the idea of being able to, like, if I wanted to make something for my wife or whatever, I can print it out and get the size just right. Now my inner core is correct, and now I can do whatever I want on the outside of it and then turn it into metal, which I think is so cool.
So cool. All right. Well, that wraps up the first hour. We can say goodbye to YouTube. If you'd like to join us for the Educator Hour, make sure that you are on the Zoom. Bye, YouTube.
It always takes longer than you expect it to.
Always.
When you're hosting, you gotta
keep talking.